You are standing on the bridge of U-156, and the water below you is on fire. It is September 12th, 1942, and the Atlantic Ocean stretches in every direction like a vast, indifferent mirror, reflecting a sky that offers no answers. 2 minutes ago, you gave the order to fire. 2 torpedoes, both finding their mark in the hull of the British troopship Laconia. You watched through the periscope as the explosions tore through the vessel, as the ship began its slow, inevitable surrender to the sea. This is what you do. This is war. You are Kapitänleutnant Werner Hartenstein, commander of a Type 9C U-boat, and you have sunk 21 ships in your career. The mathematics of naval warfare are simple. You hunt, you fire, you submerge, you escape. The water closes over your kills and you move on to the next target, the next set of coordinates, the next entry in the war diary that reduces human catastrophe to tonnage and grid references. But something is wrong. The sounds coming from the wreckage are wrong. You surfaced to confirm the kill, to identify the vessel for your records, and now you hear them. Voices. Hundreds of voices, thousands perhaps, screaming in languages that make your blood turn cold. Not just English, which you expected, but Italian. The prisoners are shouting in Italian. Your hands grip the railing of the conning tower hard enough that your knuckles go white, hard enough that you can feel the metal biting into your palms through your gloves. Italian prisoners of war, on a British transport. Allies, technically, Italy and Germany fighting together against the British Empire, and you have just sent 1,500 Italian prisoners to the bottom of the Atlantic because no one told you they were there, because the Laconia was not marked as a prisoner transport, because in war, information moves slowly and torpedoes move fast. The water is crowded with bodies. Not corpses, not yet. Survivors, clinging to wreckage, to lifeboats, to each other. Women, you realize, with a horror that tastes like copper in your mouth. There are women in the water. Children. The Laconia was carrying not just military personnel, but civilians, families of British colonial officers, and now they are drowning in oil-slicked water, while your crew stands on the deck watching. You are 34 years old. You have been at sea since you were 17. You have seen men die in every conceivable way that the ocean permits, and you have learned to distance yourself from death, because distance is survival, because a U-boat commander who feels too much does not last long in the North Atlantic, where the choice is always kill or be killed. But this is different. You make a decision that will define the rest of your life, a decision that violates every principle of submarine warfare, every tactical doctrine drilled into you during training, every survival instinct honed by 3 years of hunting in waters where British destroyers and aircraft hunt you with equal determination. You order your crew to begin rescue operations. The words feel strange in your mouth. Unnatural. A U-boat does not rescue. A U-boat attacks and flees, maintains stealth, avoids surface exposure that makes you vulnerable to counterattack. Surfacing in hostile waters in broad daylight to pick up survivors is not heroism, it is suicide. Your officers look at you with expressions that mix confusion with something like fear, wondering if the pressure has finally broken you, if you have gone mad in the peculiar way that submarine commanders sometimes do after too many months underwater, breathing recycled air and living with the constant proximity of death. But you repeat the order, begin rescue operations, and your crew, trained to obey, begins pulling people from the water. Italian prisoners first,
men in tattered uniforms who weep with relief and confusion, who cannot understand why a German submarine is saving them from a British ship. Then British soldiers who eye you with suspicion even as they accept the hands that drag them aboard, who understand that survival sometimes requires accepting help from the enemy. Then women, their dresses heavy with seawater, their faces white with shock. Children, small and terrified, who cling to your sailors with a desperation that transcends nationality or ideology. Your U-boat, designed to carry a crew of 56, now holds 200 survivors on its deck and in every available space inside the pressure hull. The submarine sits low in the water, dangerously unstable, a target so obvious that any aircraft within 50 kilometers could spot you with ease. You broadcast an open message, unencrypted, in English, a message that any Allied vessel or aircraft can intercept, that announces your position with suicidal clarity. If any ship will assist the shipwrecked Laconia crew, I will not attack her, providing I am not being attacked by ship or air force. I picked up 193 men. You sign it with your U-boat number, U-156. You are now the most visible submarine in the Atlantic, possibly in the entire war, a vessel that has abandoned every principle of concealment to become a floating hospital, a rescue ship flying the Red Cross flag alongside your German naval ensign, hoping that some shred of human decency remains in a war that has consumed decency like fuel. The rescue continues for hours. Other U-boats arrive. You have radioed for assistance, and your fellow commanders, perhaps as shocked as you are by what they find, join the effort. U-506, U-507, the Italian submarine Capellini. 4 submarines, natural predators transformed temporarily into lifeboats, their decks crowded with survivors who speak different languages but share the same exhausted gratitude of people who have looked directly at death and been granted reprieve. The radio crackles. Messages from U-boat headquarters. Admiral Dönitz himself demanding to know what you are doing, why you have compromised your position, why you are risking a valuable submarine and experienced crew for survivors who are ultimately enemy personnel or at best neutral parties in a war that permits no neutrality. You try to explain about the Italians, about the civilians, about the women and children, but the words sound inadequate even to your own ears. How do you explain a moral imperative to men who think in terms of strategy and tonnage? How do you justify compassion in a war that has made compassion a tactical liability?
The sky above is empty, for now. But you know it will not stay empty. The Atlantic is patrolled constantly by Allied aircraft, Liberators and Catalinas and Sunderlands, long-range bombers that hunt U-boats with the same cold efficiency that you hunt convoy ships. Every hour you remain on the surface, every kilometer you travel at this crawling pace with lifeboats in tow increases the probability of discovery, of attack. Your crew knows this. The survivors crowded on your deck know this, and yet the rescue continues because stopping now would mean abandoning hundreds to the sea, and that choice somehow has become impossible. You have crossed a line. You have chosen humanity over tactics, and there is no going back. The wind picks up slightly. The water slaps against the hull of your submarine with a rhythm that sounds almost like applause. Almost. But beneath that sound, deeper and more ominous, you hear the engines of your U-boat straining under the weight of all these lives, and you wonder, not for the first time, whether saving them will cost you everything, whether the price of conscience is always this high, whether being human in the middle of a war is the bravest thing you have ever done, or the most foolish. The sun begins its descent toward the horizon, and still you wait for help that may never come. The first aircraft appears on the morning of the second day, a distant speck against the pale sky that grows larger with a speed that makes your heart seize in your chest. Your lookout spots it first, shouting down through the hatch, and you swing your binoculars toward the horizon, already knowing what you will see. An American B-24 Liberator, 4 engines, long-range bomber, perfectly capable of sinking a U-boat with a single well-placed bomb. You are perhaps the easiest target this pilot has ever encountered. A U-boat on the surface, stationary, flying the Red Cross flag, decks packed with survivors so densely that your crew can barely move, lifeboats trailing behind like a funeral procession. There is nowhere to dive, no time to submerge even if you wanted to, even if you were willing to abandon the 200 people on your deck and the hundreds more in the lifeboats tethered to your stern. You do the only thing you can. You radio the aircraft. You broadcast on every frequency, announcing in English who you are, what you are doing, begging them not to attack. The Red Cross flag snaps in the wind above you, visible surely, unmistakable in its meaning. The survivors on your deck understand what is happening. You see mothers pulling their children close, see men who survived the sinking of the Laconia now facing death again from their own allies, see the bitter mathematics of war playing out on faces too exhausted for anything but resignation. Some wave at the aircraft, white shirts, pieces of cloth, anything to signal that these are survivors, not combatants, that attacking now would be murdering the very people the Allies are supposedly fighting to protect. The Liberator circles, once, twice. You can see it clearly now, can make out the markings, can imagine the pilot inside, making calculations you understand too well, because you have made the same calculations yourself 100 times. Threat assessment, tactical advantage, orders versus conscience. You are holding your breath without realizing it, every muscle in your body tensed against the sound of bombs releasing, against the whistle of falling ordnance that will give you perhaps 2 seconds to comprehend your death before impact. The crew on your deck are frozen, watching the sky, waiting. Time moves strangely. Seconds stretch into hours. The aircraft's engines drone overhead with a sound that will haunt your dreams for the rest of your life.
The first aircraft appears on the morning of the second day, a distant speck against the pale sky that grows larger with a speed that makes your heart seize in your chest. Your lookout spots it first, shouting down through the hatch, and you swing your binoculars toward the horizon, already knowing what you will see. An American B-24 Liberator, 4 engines, long-range bomber, perfectly capable of sinking a submarine with a single well-placed bomb. You are perhaps the easiest target this pilot has ever encountered. A U-boat on the surface, stationary, flying the Red Cross flag, decks packed with survivors so densely that your crew can barely move, lifeboats trailing behind like a funeral procession. There is nowhere to dive, no time to submerge even if you wanted to, even if you were willing to abandon the 200 people on your deck and the hundreds more in the lifeboats tethered to your stern. You do the only thing you can. You radio the aircraft. You broadcast on every frequency, announcing in English who you are, what you are doing, begging them not to attack. The Red Cross flag snaps in the wind above you, visible, surely, unmistakable in its meaning.
The survivors on your deck understand what is happening. You see mothers pulling their children close, see men who survived the sinking of the Laconia now facing death again from their own allies, see the bitter mathematics of war playing out on faces too exhausted for anything but resignation. Some wave at the aircraft, white shirts, pieces of cloth, anything to signal that these are survivors, not combatants, that attacking now would be murdering the very people the Allies are supposedly fighting to protect. The Liberator circles, once, twice. You can see it clearly now, can make out the markings, can imagine the pilot inside making calculations you understand too well because you have made the same calculations yourself 100 times. Threat assessment, tactical advantage, orders versus conscience. You are holding your breath without realizing it, every muscle in your body tensed against the sound of bombs releasing, against the whistle of falling ordnance that will give you perhaps 2 seconds to comprehend your death before impact. The crew on your deck are frozen, watching the sky, waiting. Time moves strangely. Seconds stretch into hours. The aircraft's engines drone overhead with a sound that will haunt your dreams for the rest of your life. And then it banks away, climbs, disappears back toward the horizon. You release your breath in a sound that might be a sob, or might be laughter, or might be something humans have no word for, some emotion that exists only in the space between annihilation and reprieve. Your crew remains silent. The survivors remain silent. No one cheers. Relief is too fragile a thing to celebrate when you know with absolute certainty that more aircraft will come, that this was reconnaissance, not mercy, that somewhere, right now, a radio operator is transmitting your coordinates to Bomber Command, and Bomber Command is calculating flight times and fuel loads and the strategic value of destroying a German U-boat, even if it means killing hundreds of survivors in the process. You are proven right within hours. The second aircraft does not circle, does not hesitate. You see it coming, and you know immediately that this pilot has made a different calculation, has decided that a U-boat is a U-boat regardless of the Red Cross flag, regardless of the survivors, regardless of the basic human decency that should make this attack unthinkable. You scream orders, get the survivors off the deck, cut the lifeboats loose, emergency dive. But there is no time. There was never going to be time. The bombs fall in a sequence that seems almost leisurely from your perspective, black shapes tumbling through the air with terrible precision, and you watch them with the strange clarity that comes in moments of absolute helplessness, when action is impossible and all that remains is witness. The first bomb misses by 50 meters, close enough that the explosion sends a column of water skyward, close enough that the shock wave hits your submarine like a physical blow, rocking the entire vessel and sending survivors sprawling across the deck. The second bomb is closer, 20 meters. Water cascades over your deck, drenching everyone, and you hear screaming now, panic replacing the numb resignation of moments before. People are jumping overboard, choosing the ocean over the certainty of being on a submarine when the next bomb hits. Your crew is trying to help them, trying to maintain order, but order is impossible when death is falling from the sky and every instinct screams to run, even though there is nowhere to run to. The third bomb strikes a lifeboat, direct hit. The boat disintegrates in a fountain of splinters and bodies and seawater, and the screaming intensifies, becomes something animal and raw that cuts through the sound of the aircraft engines and the explosions. You are shouting into the radio, demanding to know how this is happening, how an Allied aircraft can deliberately attack survivors, how the rules of war have been abandoned so completely that saving lives has become a crime punishable by death. No one answers, Or perhaps they do, and you cannot hear them over the chaos, over the sound of your own heart hammering in your chest, over the terrible understanding that your decision to rescue has transformed your submarine into a mass grave. You give the order you have been avoiding. Cut the lifeboats, emergency dive, save yourselves. The words taste like betrayal, because they are betrayal, abandonment of the hundreds still clinging to the rafts and lifeboats that you have been towing, still waiting for the rescue ships you promised would come. But staying on the surface means dying, means allowing the next bombing run to finish what this one started, means sacrificing your crew and your submarine and the survivors already on your deck for the sake of those in the water. The mathematics are brutal and simple. Some can be saved, not all, never all. Your crew moves with the efficiency of training and desperation, cutting ropes, clearing the deck, herding survivors below into spaces never designed to hold them. The lifeboats drift away, untethered, packed with people who watch your submarine prepare to dive with expressions that will visit you for the rest of your life. Accusations without words, condemnation without voice, the simple, terrible knowledge that you are leaving them to whatever fate the ocean and the aircraft choose to deliver. Some are shouting, cursing you in languages you do not speak, but whose meaning requires no translation. Others are silent, too shocked or too resigned to protest, understanding perhaps that you have no choice, that in war there are only bad options and worse options, and choosing between them doesn't make you evil, just human. The dive alarm sounds, that klaxon that usually means safety, submersion, the protective darkness of depth, now sounds like a death knell for those you are leaving behind. Your submarine tilts, bow down, stern up, slipping beneath the surface with agonizing slowness because you are still carrying too much weight, too many people, the vessel responding sluggishly to controls. Water closes over the conning tower, and you take one last look at the surface, at the lifeboats growing smaller, at the aircraft circling back for another run, and then you are blind, descending into darkness, while above you the bombing continues, the concussions transmitted through the water like the heartbeat of something dying. Inside the pressure hull, it is chaos, survivors packed into every space, crying, praying, demanding to know what is happening, why you are diving, whether their families in the lifeboats will be rescued. You have no answers that will comfort them. You have no answers that will comfort yourself. You can only navigate by dead reckoning, creeping away from the attack site at minimum speed, hoping the depth charges do not come, hoping your submarine can bear the weight of all these extra bodies, hoping that somewhere on the surface the Vichy French ships you radioed are finally arriving to collect the survivors you were forced to abandon. The sound of explosions fades gradually, distance or cessation, you cannot tell. The submarine levels off at 60 meters, deep enough to be invisible from above, shallow enough that you can surface quickly if the hull integrity fails. Your crew is silent, working with mechanical precision because thinking about what just happened would make working impossible. And you stand in the control room surrounded by survivors who trusted you, who believed your promise of rescue, who are now trapped in a steel tube beneath the Atlantic because trying to save them nearly killed everyone.
You think about the pilot of that Liberator. Wonder what orders he received. Wonder if he saw the Red Cross flag. Wonder if he struggled with the decision, or if years of war have worn away the parts of him that would have hesitated. Wonder if he is like you, someone who was simply following doctrine, doing what he was trained to do, and will spend the rest of his life trying to justify it, or trying to forget. The depth gauge reads steady, 60 meters, the dark sanctuary of the deep. But there is no sanctuary from what you have seen, from what you have done, from the impossible choices that war demands and humanity cannot bear. The silence in your submarine is absolute. Even the survivors have stopped crying, and in that silence you understand that something has broken that will never be repaired. You remain submerged for 18 hours. 18 hours in a submarine designed for 56 men, now carrying nearly 200 souls. The air growing thick and stale, carbon dioxide levels rising until every breath feels like drowning in slow motion. The chemical scrubbers that clean the air are overwhelmed, designed for a crew, not a floating refugee camp. And you ration the oxygen by ordering everyone to remain still, to breathe shallowly, to conserve what little atmosphere remains in this steel coffin that has become both sanctuary and trap. The Italians pray. You can hear them in the forward torpedo room, murmuring the rosary in voices that sound like wind through broken windows, a rhythm of desperate faith that fills the spaces between the mechanical sounds of your submarine. The British remain mostly silent, that peculiar stoicism of a people trained from birth to suppress emotion. But you see it in their eyes when you pass through the cramped spaces, the trauma that has not yet resolved into memory, still too fresh, still happening in their minds on endless loop. The women try to comfort the children, holding them in laps because there is no room to lie down, singing lullabies in whispers because loud sounds feel dangerous here, as if noise itself might betray your position to the hunters above. Your crew moves through this human cargo like ghosts. They have jobs to perform, stations to monitor, systems to maintain that keep everyone alive. And they do this with faces carefully emptied of expression, because showing emotion would be acknowledging the impossibility of what you are attempting. You have 200 people aboard a vessel with provisions for 56. You have enough food for perhaps 3 days, if rationed severely, enough water for 2. The toilet facilities, never adequate even for your regular crew, are now catastrophically overwhelmed. The smell in the submarine is beyond description. Human waste and unwashed bodies and diesel fuel and fear, all of it concentrated in recycled air that grows more toxic with each passing hour. You surface finally when the sun sets, when darkness offers some protection from aircraft, bringing your submarine up slowly, carefully, the hull groaning with the strain of unbalanced weight. When the conning tower breaks the surface, you climb up immediately, desperate for fresh air, for the sight of sky, for anything that is not the suffocating interior of your boat. The ocean is empty. No lifeboats, no survivors, no sign that yesterday's rescue attempt ever happened, except for the people packed into your submarine and the oil slick on the water that catches the moonlight like a scar.
You remain submerged for 18 hours. 18 hours in a submarine designed for 56 men, now carrying nearly 200 souls. The air growing thick and stale, carbon dioxide levels rising until every breath feels like drowning in slow motion. The chemical scrubbers that clean the air are overwhelmed, designed for a crew, not a floating refugee camp. And you ration the oxygen by ordering everyone to remain still, to breathe shallowly, to conserve what little atmosphere remains in this steel coffin that has become both sanctuary and trap. The survivors obey because they have no choice, because movement means consuming oxygen that belongs to someone else, because in this space everyone's survival is bound together by mathematics that permit no selfishness. The Italians pray. You can hear them in the forward torpedo room,
murmuring the rosary in voices that sound like wind through broken windows, a rhythm of desperate faith that fills the spaces between the mechanical sounds of your submarine. The British remain mostly silent, that peculiar stoicism of a people trained from birth to suppress emotion, but you see it in their eyes when you pass through the cramped spaces, the trauma that has not yet resolved into memory, still too fresh, still happening in their minds on endless loop. The women try to comfort the children, holding them in laps because there is no room to lie down, singing lullabies in whispers because loud sounds feel dangerous here, as if noise itself might betray your position to the hunters above. Your crew moves through this human cargo like ghosts. They have jobs to perform, stations to monitor, systems to maintain that keep everyone alive, and they do this with faces carefully emptied of expression, because showing emotion would be acknowledging the impossibility of what you are attempting. You have 200 people aboard a vessel with provisions for 56. You have enough food for perhaps 3 days if rationed severely, enough water for 2. The toilet facilities, never adequate even for your regular crew, are now catastrophically overwhelmed. The smell in the submarine is beyond description. Human waste and unwashed bodies and diesel fuel and fear, all of it concentrated in recycled air that grows more toxic with each passing hour. You surface, finally, when the sun sets, when darkness offers some protection from aircraft, bringing your submarine up slowly, carefully, the hull groaning with the strain of unbalanced weight. When the conning tower breaks the surface, you climb up immediately, desperate for fresh air, for the sight of sky, for anything that is not the suffocating interior of your boat. The ocean is empty. No lifeboats, no survivors, no sign that yesterday's rescue attempt ever happened, except for the people packed into your submarine and the oil slick on the water that catches the moonlight like a scar. You radio again, broadcasting your position, your situation, begging for assistance from any vessel capable of receiving survivors. The French ships from Dakar, you have been told, are en route. But Dakar is 2,000 kilometers away, and the ships are slow, and the ocean is vast. You do the mathematics in your head, calculating speed and distance and survival time, and the numbers offer no comfort. You cannot keep 200 people alive in your submarine for the days it will take for rescue ships to arrive. The oxygen alone will kill you, slowly, everyone falling asleep and simply not waking up as carbon dioxide replaces breathable air. You have perhaps 48 hours, maybe less. The night is clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass, beautiful and completely indifferent to the small human drama playing out on the surface of the Atlantic. You allow groups of survivors to come up on deck in rotation, 15 minutes each to breathe real air, to see the sky, to remember that a world exists beyond the pressure hull. They emerge blinking and gasping, filling their lungs with desperate gulps, and you see the relief on their faces turn to horror when they understand how vulnerable you are up here, how exposed, how easily an aircraft could appear and finish what was started yesterday. But the alternative is suffocation below, so they take their 15 minutes and then descend again, making room for the next group, a rotation of survival that continues through the night. One of the children dies, a boy, maybe 4 years old, who was sick before the Laconia sank and whose small body could not withstand the trauma of the sinking, the hours in the water, the suffocating atmosphere of the submarine. His mother holds him long after he stops breathing, rocking slowly in the cramped space of the officers' quarters where you have put the women and children, and she makes no sound at all. Grief beyond sound, beyond tears, a silence more terrible than any scream. You arrange for the burial at sea yourself, performing the brief ceremony on deck in the darkness, while your crew stands silent, and the mother watches her child slide into the water, wrapped in a German naval flag, because you have nothing else that seems appropriate. The ocean accepts him without ceremony. The waves close over the small shape, and he is gone. And you think about the 1,700 who went down with the Laconia. How many of them were children? How many bodies are scattered across the ocean floor because you fired 2 torpedoes at a ship you thought was a legitimate military target? Dawn brings the French ships finally. 2 destroyers and a cruiser, flying the Vichy flag, technically neutral, but willing to assist in rescue operations, because even Vichy France has not completely surrendered its humanity. You bring your submarine alongside with exquisite care, the transfer of survivors taking hours because 200 people cannot be evacuated quickly from spaces never meant to hold them. They climb up through the hatches one by one, blinking in the daylight, stepping onto the French decks with the uncertain movements of people who have forgotten what stable ground feels like. Some thank you as they leave. Others refuse to meet your eyes. One British soldier spits at your feet, a gesture of contempt that you accept without response, because what response is possible? You torpedoed his ship. You killed his comrades. That you then tried to save him does not erase that first act, does not balance the scales, does not transform murder into mercy. The last to leave is the mother whose child died during the night. She stands before you on the deck of your submarine, this woman whose name you do not know, whose language you barely speak, and she looks at you with an expression empty of everything except exhaustion. Not gratitude, not hatred, just a vast blankness that suggests something fundamental has broken inside her that will never repair. She hands you something before she climbs across to the French destroyer, a small toy, wooden, carved in the shape of a dog. It belonged to her son. You try to return it, but she shakes her head, says something in English you do not understand, and then she is gone, absorbed into the crowd on the French ship, and you are left holding this toy, wondering why she gave it to you, whether it is meant as remembrance or accusation, or simply something she could not bear to carry anymore. Your submarine rides higher in the water now, properly balanced, capable of diving quickly if needed. Your crew begins the grim work of cleaning, scrubbing away the evidence of the past 2 days, restoring order to the chaos. But the smell lingers, and will linger for weeks, a reminder that no amount of cleaning can restore what was. You descend to the control room and open the war diary, that official record where every action must be documented in precise military language that reduces human catastrophe to neutral description. You write, rescued survivors from torpedoed British transport Laconia, came under air attack while conducting rescue operations, forced to dive, transferred survivors to French naval vessels. The words are accurate and completely inadequate. They describe events, but capture nothing of the experience, nothing of the impossible choices, nothing of the boy in the water, wrapped in a German flag, slipping into the Atlantic in the darkness. Admiral Donutz's response arrives via radio the next day. Short, precise, devastating. All attempts to rescue members of ships sunk are to cease forthwith. This prohibition applies equally to the picking up of men in the water, to putting them aboard a lifeboat, to the righting of capsized lifeboats, and to the supply of food and water. Such activities are a contradiction of the primary object of war, namely the destruction of enemy ships and their crews. You read it 3 times, making sure you understand correctly. Then you lock it in your safe, where the crew will not see it, where the words cannot contaminate anyone else with their cold logic, their reduction of drowning men to primary objects of war. The order will become...
Your submarine turns west, resuming patrol, hunting for new targets in seas that no longer feel like merely strategic positions, but like graveyards where every depth might conceal the bodies of men you killed or tried to save, or killed while trying to save. The distinction has become unclear. The water is dark, the sky is empty, and somewhere behind you, the French ships are carrying survivors to safety. People who lived because you fired your torpedoes, and because you surfaced to rescue, and because you were bombed while rescuing, and because French ships finally arrived, lived through a sequence of events so improbable and terrible that explaining it will require the rest of their lives, if explanation is even possible. You do not sleep well anymore. The dreams come every night, variations on the same theme, the lifeboats drifting away, the bombs falling, the small body sliding into the water, and always, always the question that has no answer. Did you save them or kill them? And how do you calculate the mathematics of an action that did both simultaneously? You surface 12 hours later under cover of darkness. The ocean is empty in every direction, a vast black expanse that holds secrets it will never surrender. The lifeboats are gone, scattered by wind and current, collected by rescue ships, or sunk with all hands aboard. You will never know which. The only evidence that anything happened here is the debris field. Pieces of wood, scraps of fabric, objects that once belonged to people whose names you never learned, floating on water that reflects no stars. Your lookouts scan the horizon with binoculars, searching for survivors, for lifeboats, for any sign of the hundreds you were forced to abandon. They find nothing. The Atlantic has swallowed them as completely as it swallows everything eventually, leaving only the memory of their faces and the weight of their absence. The radio brings news over the following days. Vichy French ships did arrive, the cruiser Gloire, the sloops Dumont d'Urville and Annamite, steaming from Dakar to collect survivors from the coordinates you provided. They pulled 700 people from the water, 700 out of nearly 3,000 who were aboard the Laconia when your torpedoes struck. You do the mathematics because mathematics is easier than grief, safer than contemplation. 1,500 dead, 700 saved, and your rescue efforts, your decision to surface and load survivors and risk everything, accounted for perhaps 200 of those 700. 200 lives. The price you paid was nearly your submarine, nearly your crew, nearly your own life. The price others paid was the bombing of lifeboats, the death of people who might have survived if you had simply followed doctrine and submerged immediately after the attack. The question that haunts you is unanswerable. Did your intervention save lives or cost them? If you had not surfaced, would the British have mounted their own rescue operations faster without the confusion of a German U-boat in the area? Or if you had not broadcast your position, would that American pilot have had coordinates to target? Or would more have died in the water, waiting for help that never came, drowning slowly while ships passed kilometers away unknowing?
The mathematics of morality are not like the mathematics of navigation. There are no correct answers, only choices and consequences and the long, terrible accounting that comes later.
You continue your patrols. The war continues. U-156 hunts through the Atlantic, firing torpedoes, sinking ships, returning to base to reload and repair and sail out again into the darkness. But something has changed in you that cannot be unchanged. You find yourself hesitating before giving the order to fire, calculating not just the tactical value of the target, but the human cost in ways you never did before. How many people aboard? Are there prisoners, civilians, children? These questions slow your decision-making, introduce doubt into moments that require certainty, make you a less effective commander, because effectiveness requires a certain willing blindness to consequence. Your crew notices. They do not speak of it directly because naval discipline forbids such intimacy between commander and crew, but you see it in their eyes, hear it in the careful way they respond to your orders. They are worried about you, worried that the Laconia broke something in you, that the commander who brought them through 2 years of successful patrols has become someone else, someone too burdened by conscience to make the ruthless decisions that keep submarines and their crews alive. They are not wrong to worry. You are not the same man who gave the order to fire on the Laconia. That man still exists somewhere inside you, the tactician who can calculate angles and speeds and probabilities with cold precision. But he is buried now, beneath the weight of 200 survivors and 700 rescued and 1,500 dead. The war moves toward its inevitable conclusion. By 1943, the tide has turned against Germany. The Atlantic is no longer a hunting ground, but a graveyard, with U-boats dying faster than they can be replaced. Young crews sent out with inadequate training to face enemies who have learned every trick, every tactic, every weakness of the submarines that once seemed invincible. You know the mathematics. You know that most of the men you served with in 1940 are already dead, that most of the cadets graduating from submarine school now will not survive their first patrol, that the war is lost even if the fighting continues. But you keep sailing because stopping is not an option, because sailors follow orders even when orders are suicide, because the alternative to dying at sea is dying on land, and at least at sea you understand the rules. U-156 is sunk on March 8, 1943, 6 months after the Laconia incident. An American liberator spots your submarine in the Caribbean, on patrol near Barbados, and this time there are no survivors on your deck, no Red Cross flag flying, no reason for the pilot to hesitate. The bombs are accurate. Your submarine goes down with all hands. 52 men, including you, Werner Hartenstein, commander of U-156, who once chose to save enemies instead of fleeing, who violated every tactical doctrine to pull people from burning water, who died not because of that choice, but in spite of it, killed by the same kind of aircraft that bombed the lifeboats you were towing, completing a circle that feels less like justice than like inevitability. The story should end there. Commander dies, submarine sinks, war continues. Another entry in the ledgers of atrocity and heroism that every war generates in equal measure. But stories do not end with death, not really. They continue in the memories of survivors, in the children who grew old because a U-boat commander made an impossible choice, in the debates that continue decades later
whether that choice was noble or naive, heroic or foolish, an act of humanity or a violation of duty. The survivors remember, the 200 who were pulled from the water and lived to tell about it. They remember the hands that reached down to drag them from the sea, the German sailors who shared water and blankets and space on a submarine that had no space to spare. They remember that in the middle of a war that had abandoned every pretense of civilization, an enemy chose mercy. Some of them will testify after the war at tribunals where German officers are tried for war crimes, speaking in defense of actions they witnessed, insisting that not all Germans were monsters, that even in the U-boat service there were men who recognized the line between military necessity and murder and refused to cross it. The children remember too, though their memories are fragmentary, impressionistic, the noise of explosions, the cold of the water, the strange experience of being carried aboard a submarine by men speaking a language they did not understand, being given chocolate by sailors who should have been enemies. They will grow old carrying these memories, will tell their own children and grandchildren about the day they were saved by a German U-boat, and their descendants will search records and archives, trying to understand how such a thing was possible, how mercy could exist in a war that seemed designed to eliminate mercy entirely. The debate continues. Historians argue about your decision, Hartenstein. Some call you a hero, proof that individual conscience can resist even the totalitarian machinery of Nazi Germany. Others call you a fool who compromised his mission, endangered his crew, and violated his duty as a military commander. The arguments are academic, theoretical, conducted by people who never stood on the bridge of a submarine, watching women and children drown, who never had to choose between tactical doctrine and human decency, who can afford the luxury of moral clarity because they will never face the impossible choices that war demands. But the truth, the complicated, unsatisfying truth, is that you were both and neither, hero and fool, compassionate and naive, a man who made one decision in a moment of crisis and spent the rest of his short life living with the consequences. A man who saved lives and endangered lives, who violated orders and upheld a deeper order, who demonstrated that even in the midst of industrial slaughter, even in a war that reduced human beings to targets and tonnage and acceptable losses, individual choice still mattered. One person could still say no. One commander could still choose mercy, even when mercy was forbidden, even when mercy might cost everything. The ocean holds your body now, along with the bodies of your crew, somewhere in the depths off Barbados, where U-156 went down and never surfaced. The ocean keeps its secrets. The debris settled long ago into silt and darkness. But the choice you made survives. It survives in archives and testimonies, in children who became adults, who became elderly, carrying the memory of hands reaching down, in the knowledge that even in the darkest moments of human history, light persisted. Not everywhere, not often enough, but sometimes, just often enough to matter.
The wind moves across the surface of the Atlantic. Somewhere, descendants of the people you saved are living lives you made possible. Somewhere, the debate continues about whether you were right or wrong, whether compassion in wartime is strength or weakness, whether individual humanity can or should resist collective inhumanity. The questions have no final answers. They only have your choice, made in a moment that lasted hours, that changed everything and nothing, that demonstrated what one person can do when faced with the impossible and refuses to look away. If this story moved you, if you want to explore more accounts of impossible moral choices made by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to understand that history is not just dates and battles and grand strategies, but individual human beings making choices that ripple forward through generations. Choices that prove we are always more than what our circumstances demand. That conscience exists even when following it costs everything. That mercy is possible even when the world has organized itself around cruelty. The Atlantic remembers. The survivors remember. And now you remember too. The U-boat commander who surfaced to save the soldiers he'd just torpedoed. The man who chose humanity over tactics. The choice that defined him. The choice that killed him. The choice that matters still, decades after the water closed over his submarine and the war ended and the world moved on. Because some choices echo forever, proving that even in the midst of calculated evil, individual goodness persists. Rare, costly, complicated, but real. Remember Werner Hartenstein. Remember the 200. Remember that one person's choice can matter, even when it seems impossible, especially when it seems impossible. The dark water holds many stories. This is just one, but it is enough to prove that even in the deepest darkness, light found a way. The silence now is contemplative. The kind of silence that asks you to sit with complexity rather than simplifying it, to understand that heroism and foolishness can occupy the same action, that right and wrong are sometimes indistinguishable in the moment, that all we can do is choose and live with the choosing. The waves continue, as they always have, as they always will. You stand at the memorial 70 years later. Not you, Werner Hartenstein. You are long dead, your bones scattered across the Caribbean floor where your submarine became your tomb. But you, the visitor, the descendant, the inheritor of a story that refuses to stay buried. The memorial is small, unassuming, a plaque on a wall in a maritime museum that most people walk past without stopping. It lists the facts in the dry language of historical record. U-156, Commander Werner Hartenstein, September 12, 1942, Laconia incident, rescue attempts, bombing, casualties. The words are inadequate. Words are always inadequate when trying to contain the immensity of human choice in the face of inhuman circumstance. You think about the mathematics. 2,500 documents forged by a social worker who never fired a weapon. 200 survivors pulled from the Atlantic by a submarine commander who moments before had sent their ship to the bottom. The numbers feel connected somehow, part of a larger equation that humanity has been trying to solve since we first organized ourselves into tribes and nations and decided that some lives matter more than others. The equation has no solution. Or perhaps it has infinite solutions, each one dependent on individual choice, on the moment when a person decides whether to follow orders or conscience, whether to choose safety or strangers, whether to be the kind of human being who can look at suffering and walk away, or the kind who cannot. The war ended in 1945. The tribunals followed. Men were hanged for following orders, for participating in systematic murder, for doing what their governments and commanders told them to do. Other men were freed because they had refused those orders, because they had hidden Jews or falsified documents, or, in rare cases, surfaced their submarines to rescue survivors. But the line between the hanged and the freed was never clean, never simple. Good men did terrible things. Terrible men did good things. Most men did both, compartmentalizing their humanity into acceptable boxes, following orders on Monday and harboring refugees on Tuesday, and somehow living with the contradiction because the alternative was madness.
Whether we are the kind that bombs lifeboats, or the kind that surfaces to pull survivors from burning water, the choice is always present, always available, always ours to make. Remember Werner Hartenstein. Remember the nameless forger who became named. Remember that heroism is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Remember that systems require participation and can be resisted through refusal. Remember that one person can save 200 lives, or 2,500 lives, or even just one life, and that one life is enough, is everything, because every life saved contains infinite potential, infinite futures, infinite descendants who will walk through the world carrying survival in their DNA like a gift they never knew they received. The sun sets, the memorial remains, and tomorrow someone else will stand before it, reading the inadequate words, trying to understand how to be human in circumstances that make humanity difficult. Some will walk away unchanged, but others will carry the story forward, will make different choices because of what they learned, will refuse orders or forge documents or surface submarines or perform whatever act of resistance their particular moment demands, and the chain continues, fragile, incomplete, interrupted by failures and compromised by circumstances, but persistent, like light through cracks, like water finding paths, like conscience refusing to be silenced even when silence is safer. This is what remains when the wars end and the survivors die and the memorials fade. The knowledge that we chose, that we can choose, that choosing matters even when it changes nothing, and especially when it changes everything. The pen, the submarine, the signature, the choice, the cost, the possibility, the endless human project of deciding over and over in each generation and each crisis what kind of people we will be when tested, and the equally endless human capacity to surprise ourselves, to rise beyond what seemed possible, to demonstrate that even in the deepest darkness, even in the most impossible circumstances, light persists. Not everywhere, not always, but sometimes, just enough. The waves continue their ancient rhythm. Somewhere in the depths, metal rusts and bones rest, and stories wait to be told. This was one. There are others. There will always be others, because humanity is not one story, but infinite stories, not one choice, but endless choices, not one hero, but countless people who, in small moments and large ones, decide to act when they could have remained still, to care when they could have looked away, to be human when being something less would have been so much easier. Remember, choose, act. The rest is just water and time and the long accounting of history that remembers some things and forgets others,
but can never erase the fundamental truth that we are what we choose to be, always, in every moment, until the water finally claims us all, and someone else stands at a memorial, wondering what they would have done, what they will do when their moment comes. It always comes, the moment, the choice, the chance to be more than circumstances suggest is possible. Will you surface? Will you forge? Will you act? The answer matters, not just for history, for now, for tomorrow, for the infinite futures that branch from each decision, like tributaries from rivers, like stories from choices, like light from courage, like hope from the darkness that can never quite extinguish it. Subscribe, remember, and when your moment comes, and it will come, choose well.